time. So I thought, well, what will happen if I focus on something that I feel like I'm naturally good at? And it looks that I can be pretty good at design, especially specifically at SaaS design, and also in today's industry, everyone is understanding the need for design more and more, and it's basically a more kind of lucrative business than it was, let's say, 5 to 8 years ago.
Yeah.
One of the famous UX designers said, UX design is not art, it's craft. And the issue that we have at this point is that everywhere else, even on LinkedIn, design is part of the art category. You can see arts and design. It's part of this category. And because of that, the senior leadership and CEOs view design, or view specifically product design, as something that is just for the looks.
Real people, real stories, and real challenges that break the status quo. I'm your host, Zivile, and welcome to Perception Paradox.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Perception Paradox. And today we have a very interesting and exciting episode. We just focus more for startup founders. It's more practical, educational, and the guest of the day is Vytas. Vytas is all about the product design and strategy. I mean, like, if someone would ask me, so who is the guy from UX, UI, and design perspectives, I would say, Vytas it is. I've known him for quite some years, and he was always obsessed with this field. He delivered some great works, and currently he is doing the product design and is an owner principal designer at his agency Outframe. And he's the guy who is scaling design for SaaS companies. So I'm really excited to welcome Vytas to Perception Paradox, where we're gonna dive into the misconceptions of UX UI. Then, of course, we will look into the industry trends that are shaping the future of our digital experiences. And in general, how did he get into the design? What are the success cases he's been involved in so far, and why we in startup ecosystem and not only, and why founders should care about the design. So let's wait no more. And Vytas, welcome to Perception Paradox.
Hello. Glad to be here. Thank you for having me.
I'm glad that you're here. So how are you today? You just got back from vacation.
Yes, I'm great. It was actually partly a vacation, partly a workation. I took a week off to travel in Japan, and the rest of the time was working basically part-time. So yes, that's what I usually do with vacations.
That's how your vacation looked like. Well, at least you took 1 week off.
Yeah. I managed to do that, but afterwards I needed to follow up with a lot of the stuff, so was a bit overwhelmed for a week, but that's a daily life.
Okay, and so what is your daily life right now? Because you established an agency, right? Not that long ago, a year and a half or something.
Yes, so I officially established the agency or design studio, whatever you might call it, approximately 2 years ago. I have previously worked on different startup ideas, worked with different startups. I worked as a designer part-time or as a contractor on different startups at the same time. And now I'm basically based in Cyprus. I have my own office set up. I do design with different SaaS companies, mainly B2B companies, startups or more established companies. And trying to hit that work-life balance at the moment, because I've been overworking myself for the most of my career, actually, working at least 6 days a week, working at least 10-12 hours a day, trying to follow that startup dream. So I tell everyone that who is from the startup field that I know how it feels, but so
Okay,
now trying to kind of take it a bit slower. Yeah.
How did that come into your life? Was there some pivotal moment that you decided to strike for balance, or how did your perspective change about that? Because it's quite hard to get out of this. It's a vicious cycle, right? Once you're into that, hustling, never-ending hustle, you have your goals and missions, it's quite difficult
Yeah.
to create room and space for some other things.
Yes, exactly. Well, I was blessed to have quite a few friends that are very smart who were all into startups and creating their own businesses. Um, and a few failed, a few succeeded, a few failed multiple times and succeeded multiple times, and we all know the journey. But basically, for a while, I've been working on different startup ideas. Managed to do a little startup that, I sold for, I wouldn't say it was a lot, but I would still call it towards peanuts. But it was still a sale, so I was happy about that. And then COVID hit, and that made me rethink things. I think the main reason was that there were multiple failures, one by one, happening in terms of my startup ideas. And at some point, I realized I need a break because financially, I've kind of had little savings, and I wanted to have a more kind of safe life, especially at the time of COVID when it started. I realized that, wow, okay, I need to have something in savings. I shouldn't be living this recklessly anymore, where I just work a bit and then reinvest it into the startup idea and then kind of hustle like this. And I've been doing that for 6 years, perhaps, or 7 years, and realized that I want to kind of take a break and see how it's going to happen. So I've been taking a break for almost 2 years now, and I'm actually happy about that.
I still looking good and happy.
Yeah. I still have that startup pitch. So at least a few times a week, I have this thought of, oh, actually, this would be a great startup idea. Maybe I should do something about it. And then the next day, I'm like, no. Maybe let's just focus on what I'm doing now, and maybe a bit later on.
So, okay, did I understand you right? Your current focus is your design studio and basically your life, health, and kind of finding that yin and yang a bit in a way that how do you channel your energy, no? Where do you put your energy?
Also, another reason why I started to work full-time on design is I realized that I was naturally good at it comparing to some other designers, where I would do design part-time for quite a few years because of my startup experiences. And I realized that I am better than some designers who have been doing it full-time. So I thought, well, what will happen if I focus on something that I feel like I'm naturally good at? And it looks that I can be pretty good at design, especially specifically at SaaS design. And also in today's industry, everyone is understanding the need for design more and more, and it's basically a more kind of lucrative business than it was, let's say, 5 to 8 years ago.
Yeah. When did you realize that you're good at this, or how did you get into the design on the first note? Because sometimes we do so many things, and you were doing a lot of things as well, from startups, living multiple places, traveling, different skill sets, and then it's kind of a lot of external stimulants, and it's hard to really find that one thing and focus on. Well, at least I know many people, including myself, that we just think, oh, I'm good with this. Oh, this one is going also nice.
Yeah, so it was a journey. I went to study after high school. I went to study chemistry in the UK. And after doing the first year, I realized I'm at the wrong place, because I thought that I will study for 3 or 4 years and create some sort of business in the chemical industry. And I realized quickly that it's going to be very painful and hard, and it's going to take at least 10 years of studying. So I started researching what I want to do. And somehow I found this magical word called startups. And that was back in 2011, I think. No one was even talking about startups in much in Europe. Like it was all the States. And that's when I found Hacker News. That's where I found TechCrunch. And I was like, okay, this is it. Wow, this is perfect. But what can I do about it? How can I join a startup? I need to be useful. So I basically started testing different avenues. I thought that in order to be useful for a startup, you either need to do computer science, sales, maybe marketing, maybe customer support as an entry kind of job, or you need to do design. Design was actually something that I realized a bit later, but I tried to learn programming. That didn't work well. It was okay, but that didn't work well. I tried marketing. I hated it. I tried sales, but I was very self-conscious of my accent. Back in the day, I had a bit of an Eastern European accent in the
We
UK.
all do.
Yeah. And I still don't have a British accent, so that would have been a problem. And I generally probably not a big fan of sales. And I basically got an internship as a tester, quality assurance person, to test the software for a company called Crowd Control. It was a social media management platform in a different city. So I would take a train 2 or 3 times a week to go to a different city, to Birmingham, to work there part-time as a tester. And while working on the software, I started giving advice because the company didn't have a designer. So I started giving advice to engineers saying, well, this button is okay, but it would be better if it was in a different location. And started saying, well, this page could look a bit better, and so on and so on. So I basically started learning a tool called Sketch to make these changes to the platform of the company. And the new CTO joined, and the CTO said, well, actually, we have this idea that we want to work on. And he knew that I was learning UX design. And he said, why not? Would you be interested in creating some sort of wireframe for this new tool? And I was like, oh my God, really? You would pay for this time? I'll do it for free. So I actually did it for free while, after studies or traveling on the train. And I created a wireframe on Sketch. The CEO and CTO and other product people loved it. And I was shocked by it because I think I was 20 by then. And I was like, how can I do it? How can they not do it? How are they not able to do this? Like, for me, it was so natural to create a design of this new tool in a design tool. And I basically started working more and more on this tool because the company asked me to do it if I want to, and that's kind of how I entered the design field. And I kept on learning and learning and learning.
That's good that you did not continue in sales, because clearly to do it for free.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm joking. I know I've been the same. So that's how we entered. That's quite also like serendipity a bit of life. Did you have any other kind of interest in your life when it comes to design, or is it coming from your family or environment that you kind of you were naturally drawn?
I was naturally drawn to, I would say, pretty things. I wasn't.
Aesthetics.
Yes. So, for example, I had a BMX bicycle, and I cared more about how it looks than the actual tricks I could have done.
Okay.
So literally, I would just be kitting out, changing colors, changing all of this. Same with different bicycles, and I used to draw a bit, but very basic stuff. And I think, since I'm from the Eastern European side, being an artist or designer is not a cool thing. You think of a graphic designer, you think that it's not a well-paid job. So I just wasn't focusing on that. And also, my dad was pushing me to become a doctor. So
is he a doctor?
No, my sister is, but my dad wanted to be a doctor, but he couldn't be a doctor because of like Soviet Union stuff.
Okay, so then you had to be a doctor. I know, I feel you. Okay.
Yeah.
But then you dropped out from chemistry and continued design thing, or what was the twist?
So I dropped out of chemistry. I wanted to switch to computer science because that would have been perfect, because I could code and I could be a designer at the same time. But they couldn't accept me because I didn't have a maths exam, because I didn't need it for chemistry, because I had biology and chemistry. And I went into business economics, which I thought would technically be useful for a startup. It turned out to be 10 times easier than chemistry. So I was basically doing a few hours a week studying, and then everything else was working for that startup in a different city and learning design.
That's pretty
and playing
cool.
video games from time to time. So yeah.
And playing video games, but they had to be well designed, then it means.
Yes, 100%. Yes.
One of the top priorities. Okay, that's amazing. That's really interesting, the route of your career and life, like from chemistry to the startups, design. And back in 2011, when the European scene was still like kind of, we were just looking into the US and European scene was still rising. So That's interesting. We have a lot to talk then about the design, actually. I mean, and even I remember already many years back when I was still working in marketing, there were a lot of conversations happening about UX UI. Should it be one role? Are these two different roles? And that if you want to be a designer, you have to do both. So how is it really? What are those misconceptions between both UX and UI, and how do you differentiate these in your work, and how do you connect them?
That's a good one. First, I would probably separate UX UI design into product design, which is like interface design, mobile applications, web applications for businesses or for consumers. So let's say Uber mobile app or Deliveroo or something like that, versus a different part of UX UI that is currently called UX UI, which is website design. So technically website design is not UX UI design, but everyone uses it now for some reason. So website design is something different because it's much more creative. It's artsy. You need something that just looks nice, that doesn't necessarily serve some sort of specific purpose. Let's say some sort of illustration or infographic or something slidey, animating, and you do it for no reason, just because it looks nice, mainly. And of course you need the other elements of the website, but the art part is still very important. And for what I do, which is actual user experience design, I would call it as a craft instead of art. One of the famous UX designers said, UX design is not art, it's craft. And the issue that we have at this point is that everywhere else, even on LinkedIn, design is part of the art category. You can see arts and design. It's part of this category. And because of that, the senior leadership and CEOs view design, or view specifically product design, as something that is just for the looks and just to look pretty. They think of a graphic designer, they think of a website designer, someone that will just disappear in a small room and sketch some things on a notebook, and they will charge you 10,000 euros for it. But in reality, the product design is more like, I don't want to compare the UX design to architecture, but somehow it works well as a comparison, where we have a specific purpose. When we're designing something, we know that we're designing for someone and for a specific reason. While with art might not serve a specific purpose. It's just a painting. It's something that just looks nice, and that's it. While with UX UI design, with product design, you have very specific goals from the sales team, first of all, so that software it looks nice and is very easy to sell. From the customer services side, that it's easy to use and clients don't churn and they don't ask too many questions. And from the product side and the general business side, it needs to look and feel better than the competitor, because that's how you win clients. And of course, the marketing side, where you can show some of the platform. So yes, I view it more of a craft rather than actual art. And that's the kind of philosophy I try to follow, because it's much more logical than creative. And I don't think that I'm that much of a creative person who could just, come up with some beautiful graphic designs. I focus more on the functionality side.
But the websites also have the functionalities, right? And marketplaces, it's also part of a product design, no? Because when I think about the SaaS websites, right? So it's also, there is a user experience. We want the visitor usually to take the lead, to take an action. Well, either it's going to be book a demo with the salespeople or immediately to sign up for the product itself. So I kind of see it also as a important part. Yes, it can be a design that's in my website for personal branding. It is just for me, it's a playground where I play. My main idea is that people see my work. But then when I think about SaaS, more like related like to this kind of a whole user experience, where you're going to make that demo button so they really, what kind of color, shape, how it's going to look, so that people really book it.
Marketplaces are more of a in-between thing, because you need a website design and also product design. So for example, Airbnb is technically more of a product design app than a website design app. You don't go to airbnb.com and see feature 1, explanation of feature 1, feature 2, explanation of feature 2. You instantly get the service, right? Yeah. But for typical websites, where there's just a button which says book a demo or start a free trial. Yes, you do need to understand the flow and the UX design of how different pages will go, especially for bigger companies. But I would say what's more important than the design is the copy. How well can you articulate the problem and the solution for the person? I would say if I were to choose between beautiful design and great copy, I would always go for great copy and like a white website even, because it would be something different. And most of the time right now, I know website designers that basically create templates and they just sell them, slightly change the color and sell them. So technically right now, website designs are almost identical in most situations. And if you're a startup, you shouldn't be spending 10,000 for a website design. If you're a small startup, if you're a big startup where you're B2C and you get a lot of traffic into the website, sure, it makes sense. But if you're a B2B startup, let's say, just focus on copy and focus on actually closing that deal on a sales call instead of having a pretty website.
I mean, it still has to be some kind of need, right? I mean, when someone visits, you want to see that there is some nice. But yeah, I totally agree with you that you don't need to spend 10, 20,000 euros for a new website when you're just pre-revenue or just trying to find your product market fit. Sometimes.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Actually, the biggest clients that I worked with that are in enterprise B2B, I tend to focus mainly on interface design, on the platform design. So I don't usually touch the brand until recently, touch the website. So they actually have pretty poor websites, but they have a good, well redesigned platforms, and they use this for sales. They don't actually care too much about websites, and they're going very successfully, very well. So for B2B, the clients I worked with prove that website design is not that important. Of course, B2C is a bit more different.
Yeah, good that you mentioned B2B, because like for B2C, I think it's one of the main reasons why very good platforms are losing the competition, that they don't have good front-end design and for like web websites, and it just you come and you see the competitor which just looks way more stylish, way more, let's say if it's a product for the younger generation, they kind of go for that. They don't care about the functionality or anything or the features. They want to have it nice. It's like BMX. You would have cared if it has a better part or no. You just wanted to have nice parts, no matter what.
Yeah.
Cool. And when it comes to copies as well, is it also something what you work with some marketing people, or you also develop copies when you're doing this product design?
Copy is actually something that I struggle with as well. So if it comes to a bigger project, if it's a startup, I would recommend to do this exercise. Try to do most of the exercise on your own, because the copy of the website goes directly into the sales pitch, into the pitch to VCs. So you should have this message perfectly aligned. And the copy of the website, most of it should come from this message that you have for the VCs and for the sales demos, because you as an entrepreneur, you have to nail it down. That's the hard part of like nailing the problem and the solution and saying in 2 sentences what someone couldn't say in 10 minutes. So that's the first thing. Once you have that, and once you need to show a lot of information on the website, then yes, a copywriter would be good. But as a first step, if you're very bootstrapped or very limited on the budgeting side, I would just, experiment with ChatGPT and different kind of language models to kind of try and expand this, rewrite the message. And afterwards, when you feel like this is not good enough, then kind of go for the copywriter. I have a few friends that I basically kind of work with, that I trust them, and I always redirect my clients to them if necessary.
That's cool. And talking about now your work, I know that you have quite some interesting cases you've been working before. Can you share 1 or 2 cases where your contribution with this product design made a significant difference in the project's outcome? I don't know. Usually we measure that with traffic and with sales, right? And the client growth.
Yeah.
Do you have something more practical to share that could showcase us the essence of good product design?
So I, for obvious reasons, cannot share the name of the company, but hi to them if they're listening. It's a cybersecurity slash fintech company. They've been on the block for a long time. They have approximately 300 employees now. I think maybe if not more. They're growing fast, and they have one designer who's responsible for marketing and for graphic design. And then there's me, who does everything for product design. Their overall offering is very strong, and they have a very good backend kind of system, but the way the platform looks and feels, it's very complex and very difficult to use, and it's very outdated. So I came in more than a year ago to help them redesign everything, and we've been redesigning everything. And the main product manager that I work with has been sharing feedback from various stakeholders like CEOs or product leads, or most importantly, salespeople, and even more importantly, actual customers who basically send messages saying, "Wow, we saw the demo. We're canceling our previous contract. We're joining you guys."
Yeah.
I had screenshots of this, and
Amazing.
it was amazing to see this, especially considering how much basically they had to spend on me to work with them as a contractor, and the return on investment that they have received is basically substantial. And it's very glad to see this because the feedback is so good, and they actually closed already upsells or sales with new clients based on the demos and new designs and new development that they've made based on the designs. So they said basically that they want to work with me for years to come, and hopefully that will be the case, because I enjoy working with them. And
That's cool.
That's one of the best case studies, perhaps. Yeah, I basically created a design system for them. I designed a brand new product for them, and I redesigned existing solutions. And yes, they recently hit 100 million ARR as well. So very happy about this case study. And
That's pretty cool.
the other example that I would have, so this is a more established company. The complete opposite example would be a smaller startups. So they have an idea, they have some sort of, they maybe not even have a product. I worked with a company called Blinktime. It's an HR management platform. I worked with them for 2 months, and I designed a fully responsive web app. And they were in the middle of raising funding in the UK. And after the designs were done, I followed up with the CEO and I asked if they managed to close the round, and they said they closed the $500,000 rounds by showing the screenshots of the app, their vision, because everything that the founder and the chief product officer had in mind, we put it into the design. So they haven't developed some of the parts of it, but they managed to show it to the VCs and to angel investors what their idea is, that they're working on it, that the design is decent. And yeah, they managed to close the round and continue with the next steps.
That's pretty cool. And when you start working with clients, what kind of how does the communication look like? Do you agree on some kind of deliverables? Because it's pretty difficult sometimes to measure the success of a product design, right? It's a lot of different factors also involved into that.
Yes. Most of the time I agree. If it's a bigger product, I agree on a retainer or on a daily rate, which is actually, I'm very transparent on the daily rates. I basically say this is how much I charge for a day, and this is the approximation of what I can do in 1 or 2 months. And I usually share some previous case studies of what I were able to achieve, which helps them understand what is possible within 1 of those 2 months, or maybe a longer period of time. If it's a big product, it's impossible to estimate. If it's a smaller product and the client wants estimations, they can be only rough estimations, and they can be, there's usually a lot of information that's hidden that bubbles up to the top. So for example, a client will say, I need ABCD, and you agree on ABCD, but actually there's 3 additional things that need to come into this. So you need to either change the project price, or basically reprioritize everything. So estimating something from scratch is very difficult because the client might not even know what they need. when you do a redesign of the MVP platform, for example, it's much easier. But yeah, I kind of try to stick to retainers, but more and more nowadays, people have been asking for specific prices. If it's a smaller project, I just give a specific price point based on the amount of days that I would need to spend, and that's it. In terms of communication, depends on how on hands I need to be with a client and how big the project is. Usually I try to work asynchronously because it helps me focus on the work instead of working on something, getting a notification via Slack or somewhere else, asking to jump on a quick call. It is very convenient for the CEO or someone else because they could just, blurt out some of the ideas that they have. But for me, it completely derails me from the design process. So now I need another 20 or 30 minutes to get into the flow again. And then there's going to be another Slack notification. So basically, what I try to do in order to be productive and work fast and ultimately achieve that work-life balance, is to basically focus on the hours and block them out and reply to messages at a particular point in time, or book a call if it's some sort of more difficult project idea or a more difficult feedback session, and just focus on the work in the meantime, and then afterwards do the communications.
I think that's a great point. I've been practicing that for quite many years, and even if I would join a new company or project, I would be like, that's how I work. That's my way of communication, because I don't really have notifications. That's the same on my phone, actually. The only notification I have, you can call me, or WhatsApp. Why WhatsApp? Which I'm now want to turn it off as well, because I have my family on WhatsApp. So it's like, so for me, it's a priority. So I want to be available for them. I'm the same. If I get into the focus zone and flow, I get into that, and it takes me not long time, but it takes me time to get there. And I want to use that hyper focus time.
Yes, exactly. I actually put on very loud music and close the doors of my home office and basically have one task or one Figma page or one specific thing that I need to do. Everything is, all the notifications are off, and that's where I do my best work, because I can kind of dive in without even checking the phone or anything. And that's why I think I'm decent at this. It's hard to be, for a designer, it's hard to be a freelancer. There's many really talented designers that are struggling in freelancing and contracting, because they inadvertently get, to a degree, kind of bullied by the client, because they feel like the client is paying them, so they are obliged to answer to the client and to do whatever the client demands. However, that client might be working 7 days a week, 14 hours a day, and they will be spamming you with messages every 2 minutes. And if that happens, no one is happy, because even the design is going to be going to feel bad. And then the freelancer or the contractor will not want to work with you anymore. And I've seen quite a few freelancers try freelancing after full-time work and then going back to full-time, because it's just so difficult.
It's a lot about communication, right? Is how do we set expectations of work style? And I think in any field and industry, there can be that you have misalignment, just simply the way you work, and which is totally fine. It means that it's not for you along the way, as long as you're really sure what is your work style, and you have trust, respect, and transparency. I think it's great, but it's difficult, because we always have some kind of power games. We have this still happening. Interesting. So you mentioned that it's quite difficult. Go ahead.
Communication is so important that I actually mentioned it on the first call that I have with a potential client. I explain what kind of communication style I have, and if something works, if this process works, we can continue. There was recently a case where I needed to stop with a client, very rare case, and the client is really great. Like the platform they're working on is great. I really love the idea because it's in renewables, but me and the main point of contact, we were just different. We were just living on different planets. Like we couldn't even understand each other. If we didn't have a big language barrier, it just, the way we work was completely different. And from what I understand, that company needed and wanted more of someone who could go into the office and sit with a product team and kind of design together, while I wanted to design independently. After I get all of the information, I pass all of the designs for a review. Then I get the feedback. If something's bad, we hop on a call. And this is kind of how the communication happened. While they wanted to be completely hands-on, real-time engagement, and that unfortunately didn't work. And I think both sides understood that we're nice people from both ends. We're trying to achieve something, and we're not like psychos or anything, but it just didn't match. And
But
that
that's
could be
such
the
a
case.
normal thing, and that's really normal thing. We have to accept that. Like, I mean, it happens. We are all different. There is space for everyone, and sometimes we need to find that good match, right? When it comes to the collaborative or project partner, whatever.
Yeah.
So, look, Vytas, you mentioned that this design field and space is quite crowded, maybe a bit unfair, challenging, and you started your own design studio. Where did you get the courage to do it? Because many of us hold ourselves back to really embrace and to own it and to start business. We all dream about that. Not all. Many of us dream to start something, but we miss that one thing that would encourage us. How was it for you that you found the courage to do it? Or was it a natural transitional process that you just felt ready?
I actually think I was probably ready for opening a design studio earlier on, but for me still the challenge or the goal was to create a successful startup, which I technically can say I guess I ultimately failed in that. There's probably something that I'm missing, or maybe I didn't have a circle around me that's correct, or maybe I'm just one of the unlucky persons who tries different things. But I wouldn't call myself unlucky. I think there's just certain traits about me where I basically cannot do these crazy jumps that entrepreneurs sometimes need to do, where they need to live off of ramen for multiple years in order to finally find that success. I don't think I'm that person who could do the famous Airbnb story, right? Where you don't give up for 5 years. Yes. I think I'm not that person, and maybe that's why I failed on quite a few of these ideas, because I remember I had an idea, I gave up on it, and then a few years later on, I see there was another person who had this idea and they actually succeeded in it. So I think maybe there were some things or maybe I just didn't like the idea that much. For me, the ultimate goal was to create a startup, right? Create a tech business and have this financial and then all of the other independence, of course, sell a company 5 years from now,
Why was it
and
the
then
ultimate
retire
goal?
successfully. And design was just something that was actually paying my bills while I was trying to achieve that goal. So I was freelancing and working as a contractor ever since I quit that job after university. I quit the first job that I mentioned where I became the designer to become a freelancer. I started traveling as a typical digital nomad and working on different ideas, but part-time working as a designer. And this is something that I thought it was easy for me. I was natural, and I was working mainly on the B2B side of things because it was more complex. And a few years ago, I saw a few case studies of people who opened design studios and they're doing pretty well financially. And I thought, well, actually, maybe it's not that bad, because I was very worried about opening an agency or opening a design studio, because the typical image that you have is you hire a bunch of junior designers, like a typical design agency. Then you need to aggressively reach out to clients. The revenue goes up and down while expenses are like this. So there's a very high chance that you will actually fail or just go bankrupt, because there's going to be one client that cancels and you have too much of a payroll and you need to close the shop, and that's it. I thought that was the only way to do it. But actually there's a different way where you can basically work with a small team, work a small remote team of your own, and work with a few select clients and have a decent business that way. So that was the change that I had. I basically saw a few case studies of people doing it successfully, and that's kind of how I started.
And do you have a team now, or you're still solo?
I have a full-time designer at the moment, and I have a few freelancers that I work with. So some of the easier work that I give to them, more difficult UX design work I always do myself, or if it's something that's more time pressing. So yes, that's kind of how it works at the moment. Maybe in the future
Cool.
I'll get someone else to help me again, even more so, but at this point it's more than enough.
Amazing. I still want to go back a bit to your startup thing. So, how many
Yeah, sure.
ideas have you tried to test? And you told me that there was one that you sold, kind of. So, it's kind of a checkpoint. Okay, I succeeded to reach my goal. And what was the
Ah,
idea that you sold?
so it was I wouldn't call it a startup. It was more like a bootstrapped small internet business. It was a platform for real estate agents in the States to create single property websites. So
Okay.
let's say you're selling a house, you go to an agent, and the agent says, actually, your house will have its own website with the representation gallery instead of just going into one of the marketplaces and you see stock photos. So it looks fancier, basically. And we created this platform where you can actually upload images, choose a template, add content, and that's it. It's published. It's sitting in one place. It's kind of like Wix for a very specific niche. And we're trying to basically get clients, and we thought that it would do well, but that's when COVID hit, and
Okay.
all of the sales completely plummeted. Everyone stayed in house, and that was one of the reasons why I decided to basically even start the studio, because we're so optimistic about it, and then something completely uncontrollable came, and then we couldn't deal with it. And since then, we got one or two bigger clients, and we basically put it into micro acquire back in the day. Now it's called acquire.com, I think, to see what we could get. And yeah, we just sold it to the highest bidder.
Amazing.
And that was it. It basically covered some of our costs. I would say in terms of time, it covered some of our time, some of our costs, but as with a lot of startup journeys, it's not as nice as it might sound. When you start thinking about your hourly rate and how many hours you spent, you realize that, oh, actually, I could have just done my job in a regular full-time kind of employment, and I would have technically earned the same thing hourly or
Yeah.
daily or monthly, which is the side that most people don't talk about, where they work on a startup for 5 years, sell it for $1 million, or for 7 years, sell it for $1 million, but they actually have 30% stake in it, and then they have to give it to angels, and then they have to calculate all of the time and investment they had, and then they realize they have too many gray hairs, and they're single, and they don't have a family, and they don't really have much of a life, and that's the kind of darker side of things that
That's good.
hit me
Yeah.
as well, that I realized, do I want to go back to this? Maybe let's just take a break. I'm sure I'll want to go back into it, because it's just a scratch that I sometimes can't resist. But for now, I'm kind of still
Okay,
taking
cool.
a break.
I've got this. It kind of made it clear. Good that you are also showing that not that nice part of the startups, but what I've learned a lot, especially after my own involvement into the startup scene, that, I mean, what is success and what is the successful founder, and why should you do a startup? If you really have this one huge problem you want to solve, and you cannot sleep, you're obsessed with that, that's why you really should go that way.
Yeah.
Because then with the external capital, it can make you move faster, and you really do the global impact. But other than that, just for the validation, there are easier ways to get, I guess, external validation if that's something you're seeking for. And startup scene is an amazing and very fun playground. And
Oh
there
yeah,
is
I totally
great,
agree.
yeah.
I just think that maybe I don't have it in me, because in order to be really successul, you need to be one of those
But you need
hustlers
to have
and
this
very
problem to
determined.
solve, because if the main motivation is only to get rich, it's not really the place where you go for it. I think that's what I've learned, because then because otherwise it's still a different type of employment. You have a lot of commitments when you get into the investment game, so you just really, really have to love it as well. But that's
Yeah,
pretty
I
cool
agree.
that that's pretty cool that you also had the courage to kind of accept that within yourself, and to really make a decision, and to decide, okay, right now I'm gonna press a break, and it's fine. I tried. It's not for me. I want different things right now, and I'm gonna focus where my strong skills are. So
Yeah.
congratulations on that, because it does require some thinking and courage and reflection. And it's not that easy. So
Yeah,
well done.
this was the hardest pill for me to swallow. Like this
Wow.
exact part
Yeah.
where I said, well, actually, maybe I'm not that determined. Maybe I'm not that smart. Maybe there's other reasons that helped me realize actually it's better for me to. It's almost like at that point it became more of a toxic relationship with startup ideas where I kind of started looking for someone else's problems to solve, which in turn made me look for solutions to problems that don't really exist, or they're just good to have. So I entered this like infinite loop of trying to look for someone else's fake problems, and that's why I needed to escape. And I still write down ideas on my notepad at least weekly, and I know
Amazing.
that I will go into one of them from at this point. Maybe in a bootstrap way, maybe not in a VC way, but yeah,
That's cool. That's great. I think having this daily habit, just constantly like writing down things and this connecting the dots, thinking about not only your own field, is pretty good for your mind and mental exercising. But
yeah,
let's go
exactly.
back a bit again to the UX. And we already discussed before with you, before jumping on a podcast as well, that you love startups, I love startups, and it's always very interesting, not only the misconceptions, but also like, okay, so startups, when it comes to the word startup, it's usually like very small budget to do things, and you need to prioritize, and sometimes it becomes very difficult, especially if it's some kind of deep tech startup where everything is based on heavy engineering rather than the commercial side, which sometimes gets forgotten. So for startups working with tight budgets, what would be your top kind of recommendations for implementing effective UX UI for your product?
That's a good question. I've actually written a post about it on LinkedIn, and I want to write a blog post, and I want to expand it, and maybe even write a kind of small PDF playbook where I in detail go into all of the parts of how to actually create a design on a very tight budget, because I think it's very possible, even without me, even without any other designer, to do just the MVP. You need to pick the right libraries, component libraries. You need to pick the right style based on what you see from the competitors. You need to just follow quite a few steps. And I think someone who has at least a bit of the product knowledge. So let's say someone who worked as a product manager, for example, they usually know how the flow is supposed to look like. They have an idea on, they can distinguish good design from bad design. And if you have someone like that, usually it could be the CEO who has the product background. It could be maybe even the CTO who has a bit of the product background. There's a few basically resources that could be accessed in order to create the first initial version that will look pretty decent. And one of the fastest and easiest things that you could do is to pick a correct component library. So what I mean by that is, based on the front end framework that you use, you can pick one of the component libraries. What that means is it's a stock system of different buttons, input fields, popovers, modal dialogues, basically most of what you need for your app, either a mobile app or interface or web app, that you can get out of the box. And you just change a few colors, change a few settings, and voila, you have all of these different components that you can reuse. Because for a lot of companies that I redesign, they come up with their own styles of buttons, of input fields. They don't follow the accessibility standards. They don't look well, even if the user experience, even if the flow is good, it will still not look great. But by having a good component library that's clean and inputs are very easy to use, for example, it automatically makes the app look nice. So one of the few libraries could be, it's called ShadCN UI. It's an open source library created by, I think, a guy who works in Versal or in one of the basically bigger companies. There's Untitled UI for Figma. There's basically different kind of, if you type component library for your front-end language, let's say React, you will find a blog post with lists of best libraries. And that's where you need to start. That's where most of the impact comes from. And designing these components takes a while. I have actually had a few clients who said they wanted something like this, and I just told them, here's a library, here's how you need to do this, and it actually solved their problem. And I helped them without even working for them.
Okay.
So sometimes not that much is necessary to achieve what you want.
Well, thanks for sharing. It's very valuable, actually. Maybe we can put some links into the description of this episode. I mean, I guess that even answers the question. Like, you just have to start, because I've seen many cases. I don't know if that's the case also for you when you especially work with more mature SaaS companies. Just in terms of in general branding of the company, right? That they leave it for such a last minute, and usually they have a great product, but they don't really care about how do you position that product, how does it function, and so on. We're just gonna develop everything in backend. So, and I'm an advocate of branding, but you need to work on the branding. You have to. It's all about the story out there, because the competition is so huge. But even if you have the best product and solving the largest problem, it's just so saturated right now in the market that you really need to somehow expose yourself.
Branding is another thing that I think can be done very much on a budget. Yes, there are perfect branding designers that will do a custom design for you for 10K in a week or two. But this is not the only option. You can, there are designers who are actually selling pre-created branding packages for $1,000 or $2,000. You can find relatively cheap branding designers on marketplaces like Upwork, or if you go to Dribbble, you will find quite a few branding designers. Now the competition in design is quite fierce, so now it's a buyer's market where you will get hundreds of applications from designers if you're looking for something and have a specific kind of budget. So I think nowadays it's not that difficult to find someone that's good in branding. However, the difficulty is finding the person who has a good portfolio. And to do that, you need to have some taste. If someone who is, let's say, if someone who doesn't have a perfect who doesn't have any sense of kind of style or what good versus bad looks like, they will make a bad decision and hire a designer that has a bad portfolio, and then the branding will not look well. And of course, you can't expect someone from Southeast Asia with a $2 per hour hourly rate for you to create something that looks as good as your competition that was created for 10K. You cannot expect that. Yes, there are cheaper designers in different countries, but most of the cheap ones are just not that experienced. So you need to be careful with that. And same applies to the West as well, of course.
Cool. So what do you still like most about your job and the design?
I think it's the feedback that I get from the clients. I think it's the feedback that I get not even from the clients, but from the clients' customers. The first case study that I talked about, which was a fraud company, when they share feedback, when they share a screenshot of a message from one of their sales guys talking to a client, where they say, wow, this is great, this is amazing, I'm switching to this product because the other one is much worse, and so on and so on. This is something that kind of makes my day, and I feel like, yes, I've done something good, because I of course don't want to just push pixels from left to right. I want it to have some sort of impact, and when I see someone be happy about it, I'm automatically happy about it as well. That's probably the biggest thing. Of course, there's the creativity part. I like that I can kind of focus on my work. I am generally apparently quite a solitary person in terms of work. The way I do work. A lot of people need to go to the office. I'm actually fine working on my own. So that's another element that I like as well, of course. But I would say in general, it's the feedback, basically, where the client says, hey, great work, this is amazing. a lot of impact, done very well. It's fast and stuff. So this is something that makes me feel
drives
good
you.
about myself and what I've done. Yeah.
Oh, so good to hear. Thank you for sharing. And I've just realized that I forgot to ask you one question. I really want to ask because I'm pretty sure everyone is very curious. When you start a new business and so on, one of the key factors and the concerns are how do I get the clients? So how do you get your clients? How do you find them or they find you?
That's the hardest part of having any sort of agency, not just a design agency. If you have a sales agency or anything else like that, that's the hardest part. You need to start with everywhere. LinkedIn, cold email, but that's much harder. I think at the beginning you can start with marketplaces because that's where the clients already are looking for something. So at the beginning of my career, I found jobs for Dribble, which is a specialized platform for designers. Now Dribble is not that great for acquiring clients, so I post on LinkedIn. I reach out to people on LinkedIn if there's a particular needs. I tried cold emailing, however, that's more difficult. It requires much more resources to kind of apply to it. And I always looked at cold emailing as a very, very bad thing, cold outreach, because you just spam people. But nowadays, actually, cold outreach can be so well made because you focus on a very specific subset at a very specific time and not aggressively without any crazy spam. And I have received responses where people are like, oh, well, actually, how did you know? We're actually thinking of hiring a designer. So
I've done my research. Yeah, it's when you do your research.
Exactly.
But it's the same with everything. I think what you're mentioning is kind of, there is no golden rule. You just have to be out there, talk to people, write to them, ask them. Instead of pushing, you understand what are the needs of the potential client as well. What you mentioned with your email. So one more question about the UX UI before we wrap up.
Sure.
So we have now the technology for many years, right? AI came to our world. How do you see AI in design? How does it help your with your work? And maybe you see some kind of future elements that will help to, I don't know, speed up or to improve the work or to help others to do the design?
That's a very good question. It's been the main topic in the design world for designers ever since ChatGPT came out, I think, when people started using it and freaking out. Because we as designers know there's quite a few elements that we could automate. Basically, what the current, I'd say AI is more as an automation tool at this point now on. I tried all of the different AI apps for design and most of the time they're not good. They will get there at some point with some specific things, but what the tools will not have is taste or be able to connect the product, the problem that you have with product versus the design that the AI tool spits out. That's the hardest part. Kind of finding the connection between what client is giving us feedback versus what you want versus what the tool is spitting out. That's going to be the hardest part. But I've been seeing the impact of automation already now, because it's doing something that I'm not sure how much of an effect it has on different industries, but right now I can see that the best designers are automating parts of their work to get even more clients, and more clients are going to those designers. So what's happening is basically bigger designers grow more, while less experienced designers or less talented designers in any way, this could be either skills or something else, they are struggling more and more. So what I'm seeing, and I've started seeing this trajectory already, good designers find ways to work much faster, work with more clients and work faster, deliver more, hence earning more and getting more clients again and again. While the simpler designers, they actually, or less experienced designers, juniors, for example, they have been fired from their jobs a few years ago, and they're struggling with freelance contracts. They get bad salaries. They're overworked because the only job they can get is at an agency, and the agency forces them to work 80 hours a week. So I'm seeing more of a divide between designers who embrace automations and design faster versus designers who are doing everything, but they don't really know how it works because they don't have that much experience yet, and they're not that keen on these automation tools.
Okay.
But at the same time, there's more and more kind of the expectations of clients are becoming very high. So you can just say, well, I'm actually just going to spend a few hours because some of this is automated and that's it. No, the clients are expecting more and more of what you're accomplishing at the same time. So that's kind of the effect that I see. And with automation, it's going to enable these good designers to do even more. And I think the younger designers need to find a way to enhance their skills and start using these automation tools, or they will need to do low-paying design jobs or transition into a different career.
Cool. Thank you for sharing such an insightful approach. Do you use AI yourself in automation and stuff?
I use automations on Figma, yes, to kind of design faster. In terms of AI, it's not that useful. I do sometimes use Midjourney for illustrations and inspiration mood boards. That works very well, actually. And sometimes on design documentation, I can use ChatGPT. But everything else is just automation. The libraries that I was talking about, creation of these libraries, the ability to reuse them. Nowadays, the reason why it's becoming even more competitive for startups is, in terms of the UX world, there's specific standards how an app is supposed to look like. 10 years ago, everyone was creating their own random stuff. Now, everyone knows that side navigation needs to be on this side, or if it's a tab bar for mobile, it needs to be on this side. There needs to be an icon, a little text at the bottom. There's all of these rules that make it very easy for you to create software. And it's even easier to develop software now. So once you have these rules and you have the programmer who can develop things, it's much easier to create powerful software. And that's why I think there's quite a few companies that come out as startups that the main thing they provide is much better user experience and better design, and they win the market. Because if you don't embrace design and how much easier it is to enable it now, then someone else will come into your field as your competitor, because they will realize that building whatever you built 5 years ago or 3 years ago is much easier now, and they will do it much faster by embracing these different automations, component libraries, and all of the other guides. There's already a few apps that are doing it in such a great degree where the reason why they succeeded at the beginning and why they got the critical mass is because of how they figured out the design, and their value proposition is relatively similar.
So we covered a lot of the components, right? But let's put ourselves into the shoes of a founder. So I'm a founder, I have this kind of we're developing the product. I'm non-designer, I right now don't have the budget. Okay, components is one part, but what are the other key elements for a non-designer to actually develop a decent product design?
So there's a specific, what I would recommend, there's specific things. First of all, choosing font. Choose a font called Inter. It's something that every designer can even use and every system uses. It's the best thing ever. Then for color palettes, if you need specific colors, type in Radix UI color palettes. You will find different color palettes based on your style, and you will be able, if you like blue, you can choose blue. Usually you'll have a specific idea. You look at a competitor. If they're using blue, green, and yellow, then you should probably use purple or some other color that distinguishes you from the competitor, right? Try to stay on the light theme. Don't do dark theme. This is something only for bigger companies. You would be just wasting time if you create a dark theme, unless you only go dark theme only because your product is for developers, for example. In all of the other scenarios, light theme, light colored, don't worry about having light theme or dark theme. Then for icons, purchase a plan on Streamline UI or use Font Awesome Icon Pack. This is not a sponsored post, by the way, but if any of these people want to reach out to me, just let me know. Then there's small things such as grids and sizings. Always follow the 8-pixel grid rule. or four pixel grid rule. You can talk to your developer about it. They know everything, especially if they do the front end. Basically, everything needs to be divided or created with 8 pixel kind of metrics. So if a box need to be, let's say 30 pixels, don't do 30, do 32. 16, 24, 48, and so on and so on. This will make the system look much cleaner and more scalable, and most importantly, easier for a developer to implement. Exactly the same thing with spacing. For border radius, don't go for super cute, or just go for board radius 4 or 8, and that's it, or fully rounded. But I would recommend 4 or 8. This is the safest option. Best component libraries, I already mentioned ShadCN. But I would also recommend Radix UI, Tailwind, and there's a few others. And for best Figma libraries, where you can actually create a design, if you want to dabble in that yourself, you can use End Design library that connects together with the front end, and there's Untitled UI and so on. And in terms of inspiration of how you would want your app to look like, go to mobbin.com, purchase a subscription. Or maybe you can even do it with a free plan, but I would ideally purchase a subscription, find a competitor or inspirational product. So let's say if your competitor is a big company, or if you're doing a fintech, let's say app, type Revolut, type Cash App. In Mobbin, you can see all of the flows in there. You can see their full onboarding flow. Just copy paste this, and that's it. You're done. With these specific guidelines, you will have an onboarding flow that is almost identical to Cash App or Revolut with your, of course, changes. Don't just blatantly copy paste it, but you will technically have a correct onboarding flow instead of something that you came up with. You don't need to reinvent the wheel. There's a lot of UX practices that we need to follow, and you can just basically find inspiration from the best teams that are doing it and then basically apply it yourself.
Amazing.
So,
Very good practical tips. Thank you so much for sharing. I think that will be
Hope
very
that helps.
valuable for someone who is kicking off before they can really get a designer in team, you know? Cool.
Yeah, exactly. Or if you already have an app and want to redo it, just get some designer to do a UX audit. Pay them, I don't know, whatever they're charging, 500 euros, whatever, for them to do a detailed design review and then apply these changes. And that's it. 500 euros well spent. You don't need to hire a designer for full-time or part-time.
Cool. Thank you, Vytas. That's really valuable.
Yeah, I can't believe I'm not selling myself and actually selling something else.
Well done. Well done. That's how it works in life. I think it's a great way to end this episode about the design. Wow. Thank you, Vytas, for sharing. But I have one more question for you. I always ask my every guest to think of some kind of thought question for all of us after this episode to think about. Something, I don't know, that could get us into some kind of, it can be personal focus, career focus, some kind of life philosophy focus question so we can ponder and think.
I would say that comes from my side, and that might not apply to everyone, but it's, especially in the entrepreneurial journey, you sometimes need to think less and do more.
Cool. I mean,
That's about it.
straight to the point. That's really, really well said. I agree. Sometimes we just need to think less and do more and try things. Vytas, where can people find you and follow your journey?
They can find me on LinkedIn. My name is Vytas, Vytas, BU. And on Twitter, same initials, Vytas, BU. And that's where I post most of the time.
Amazing. I will leave the links on X, by the way. I will leave the links in the podcast description. And thank you so much for joining me today here at Perception Paradox. It was so great to have you and for sharing both your story and about design. So thank you.
It was lovely. Thank you very much.